let's go. I want to talk to you today, before we start the main information in the book, let's talk about, no, midtime's at the end. We're going to talk about time. I want to talk about something called Zman. We're not. We're going to be, in a moment, on page 51, 52. That's going to be in a moment though. Let's talk about time for a moment. How does time work? What's the Jewish view of time? And why is that important in relation to Shabbos, in relation to Pesach, which we're discussing over here, and everything else. What is actually Pesach called in the Torah? What's the official name in the Torah for Pesach? Chag HaMatzot, that's right. Chag HaMatzot. That's how it's referred to in the Torah. Interesting, we call it Pesach. Hashem calls it Chag HaMatzot. We'll see why later on in a couple of weeks, why that's important. It's all referred to as Zman Cheruseinu, the time of our Cheruseinu, write it down. The time of our freedom, that's correct. Let's just do a quick understanding of Zman, what it means, why it's important. We actually mentioned it with Purim a little bit. We say, Bayem Mehem, Bazman Hazeh. Bazman Hazeh. What does the word Zman literally mean? We refer to it as time, but it means something else. We see it elsewhere. Anyone see another word in there? Zimun. What's Zimun? A gathering, yeah. A gathering or a preparation, really. Preparation. Let's prepare ourselves for benching. Let's make a zimun, right? Because we're preparing ourselves. Actually, preparation for something. So time is prepared. What does that mean? Who actually did this with me? Well, I think I did an introductory class, maybe with Lizzie and Sarah maybe a while ago. Okay, I'll just do a quick review. Maybe.
I don't remember Zman. Maybe it was
You did it with Shabbat class. Because
could be. It applies to Shabbat, but it applies more for the Chagim, interestingly enough. Okay, so how does time work? So we talk about time as time line, that's correct. It's a timeline. Okay, that means something happened over here, right? We get to 1492, right? We get to 1776, wherever you are along the line, and you end up with random dates until you get to where we are today, which is 2016. Okay? There's no relation between these points. These points are not related, right? This point is not related to this point. We just will commemorate various parts from the past on this line. Right? There's no relationship, like I don't know, Thanksgiving. Okay, they chose the fourth Thursday in November. Who chose that? I think FDR chose that specific date. There's no relation between that date and the original event that happened. Are we listening? Are you with me? There's no relationship. We just chose random dates. If they would say, you know what, July 4th, let's make, I don't know, February 15th, would anyone really mind? I mean, we just shift it around. The actual date has no relevance. The years are important, but the actual date itself is not relevant where it appears in the year. These are random dates that were chosen. Okay? This is very, very different to the Jewish idea. Let's start with one basic idea. We know that Avram Avinu, when the three Malachim came to him, yeah? What does Rashi say? Rashi says that they came at a certain time. What was that time? On the third day, that is correct. What time of year was it though? What did he give them to eat? No, not summer. What did he give them to eat? It was very hot. It was very hot, but that's very good, but it wasn't. He gave them a lot of meat, and he gave them bread. He also gave them ugot. What's ugot? So that's the modern translation. The biblical translation, the word ugot, was when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, they made ugot matzot. This is matzot. He gave them matzot. Why? Because it was Pesach. That's what Rashi says a little bit later when referring to Lot. So it was Pesach time. How could it be Pesach time? How is that possible? How is it possible that Avram Avinu celebrated Pesach and ate matzah? What's the problem with that? What? It didn't happen yet. We weren't even in Mitzrayim yet. How could you say that the time was Pesach when Pesach didn't even occur? So the answer is something very, very fascinating. It's going to reveal something very, very important and central to this discussion. Really, the whole course only makes sense if you understand this one idea. And it comes down to this. Let's crunch it to one point. There is a time called Pesach time. It's always existed. Time isn't a timeline. This is not a Jewish concept. Time is a time. Lizzie? See if you remember. Spiral, that's right, spiral. That's right. Like that. Time goes through and repeats itself like that. You get to the various years, here's 0, here's 1, 2, 3, and all the way down. Why is that important? Because when you get to a certain point in the year, you come back to that original place, but a year later. It can't be a circle, or you see your previous self, and then you know you've been drinking too much. So it must be that you are a year later, but in the same place. So time's like a place, like a makal. It's prepared for us. It always existed. There is a time in the calendar called Zaman Cherusin, time of freedom. When is that? 15th of Nisan. It's always been there. Happens to be in the year 2448, which is our key year. The only year you have to remember in this class, unlike art history that make you remember 1,000 more dates for some absurd reason, is that the Jewish people managed to tap into that time and leave. So it's not that we celebrate Pesach to commemorate Egypt. The Jewish people left Egypt because it was Pesach.
Wait, in 248, what did they...
The Jewish people left Mitzrayim.
Right, well, what are you saying?
So I'm saying that at that time, in that year, actually they had to leave, because had they waited one more year, they were completely assimilated. They had to leave actually at that precise moment, to be fair. We're saying, well, why that? So the key is not the year, the time in the year. The time in the year was 15th of Nisan. That has always been the time of freedom. Hashem set up the calendar that way. The calendar was set up so that when we reach that time of year, there is something pervasive in the air, and that is called Cherus, freedom time. Happens to be a really great example of that is in the year 2448 when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim at that time.
Yeah, but what are the times that prove that that date?
I'll show you. Yeah.
Doesn't that contradict with the idea that people made the calendar? Because didn't God say like the whole idea of
Very, very good.
that we
Excellent, excellent. We count the months, and the months start again counting from there. And Hashem says this is the time for it. So we count the months. You're absolutely right. How do we count the months? We follow the moon, the lunar calendar. That's right. So we follow the lunar calendar. Now we also add an extra month, like this year is a Shana Mubarak, which means a pregnant year. It's a literal translation. We had an extra month. There's 2 Adars, right? Because we have to push. Why is that important? Because Pesach must appear, when does the Torah say? Write this down. In Chodesh HaAviv, in the springtime. In the springtime. Because freedom is connected to springtime. Right? The world, agriculturally, the world is coming free. We're seeing all the flowers coming out, all the trees, and all the plants. Right? The Arab Spring. Right? Everyone feels that they're free. We can't be free in the winter. We're too cold. Summer's too hot. So we'll go in the springtime. So Pesach must be in the springtime. That's why there's an 11-day difference between the solar calendar and the lunar calendar. So the Christian world follows the solar calendar. The Muslims follow exclusively the lunar calendar, which is why their holidays, like Ramadan, travels backwards through the year. It travels through the year. We can't let that happen because Pesach has to remain in the springtime. So we always have an extra month, twice every 7 years, to push the month forward in order to push the holiday forward. Are we following me? Yeah. Again, this is crucial information. So right, the first mitzvah we were given in Mitzrayim still was a Chodesh Zelachem. That's the first mitzvah given to the entire Jewish people to make a calendar, to follow, to track time. So it became an official time in order to track it and keep it going. The Hebrew word for a year is Shana. What's a Shana? Here, but it also means L'shana, to repeat, because the year repeats itself. The year repeats itself.
Every 4 years, this or every 7 years? This
What?
a month added.
Twice every 7 years, I believe.
Twice in years.
Yeah. So an extra month then to push it forward, because you have to keep Pesach in the Chodesh Aviv. Why? Because that's the season it must fall in. Pesach must fall in the spring season in Chodesh Aviv. But the date itself must be, and the Torah itself tells us that that's the date. Bayam Mahem, those are the days that happened back then, but this is the Zman. Which means that when we get to Pesach, and everything we're describing over here isn't just events that we're commemorating from the past. They are happening again and again and again. You get to the same place. Let's say, I don't know, Sabrina invites me, because she's so popular on social media, to go to Times Square. Times Square for New Year's Eve, let's say. We'll talk about New Year's Eve in a second, by the way. It's also an interesting point. Just come to stuff. I go there, right? 2015, right? It's terrible, screaming, shouting, and the ball's dropping. Okay, fine. And a year later, just come back. I go, wait, do I see myself again? No, I was there a year ago, but I'm in the same place. That's exact. You get to some point of the year, you're in the same place. Someone could actually leave something there for me, and I could pick it up. Someone could take something away, which was there last year, or you can add to it. You're literally, what you're doing is, Rav Dessler said, you're traveling through the year on a train, and you get to various stations, tachanot, along the train. And the train is moving in a spiral like a parking lot kind of way, up and up and up, and you get to various places. Now, once a year, you need to have freedom. Once a year, you need to have kapara. When is that? Yom Kippur. That's freedom. That's forgiveness time. Once a year, you need to have Torah. What's that? Shavuot. Okay. Once a year, you need to have happiness. Simcha. What's that? That's actually Sukkot, right? V'samachta b'chagecha v'yita'ach samech. We'll discuss that next semester. We'll see why Sukkot really represents emunah and simcha. That's really what it comes down to. Okay, it's all about happiness. That's what Sukkot is all about, which is counterintuitive because you're leaving your house and living in a leaky hut. But that's happiness. That's the definition of happiness for us. Having faith in God. But that's not for now. But Pesach is all about freedom. So we get to this time of year, we go free. The non-Jewish calendar doesn't have this. The non-Jewish calendar has been messed around and chopped up and added, moved around. Right? What's actually the new year in the secular calendar? So you would have thought, right? But actually it wasn't. For a long time, the new year was actually March 1st. I'll prove it to you. October is, what's oct? 8. October, 8 legs. November is 9. December, what's the deck? 10. January is the 11th. February is the 12th, which is why at the end of the 12th month we have the leap year. We just had a leap day. Why is the fudge factor at the end of February, not the end of December? Because that's when the new year was. That always was the new year. Then things changed around. They moved the calendar around, interestingly, to most probably coincide with the Christian faith. When was Jesus supposedly born? He was born December 25th. December 25th. Supposedly he wasn't actually, but that's irrelevant. That's the date they ascribed to him. Let's follow. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, the first, 8 days later. Yeah. That's what you're celebrating. He definitely was Jewish.
Was he actually Jewish?
Yes, he was. Okay. My point is that the secular calendar moved around, chopped up. The Jewish calendar is kadosh. It is holy. We don't mess around with it. It follows a very specific path. You can't celebrate Pesach a week later. I mean, you can, but you're doing nothing except eating mussel and getting a stomach ache. It's got to be at that time. But this is the time. And the time is freedom. But the time is also miracles. Look in your books. So there are a number of miracles that happened at this time. So we're on page 51. Right, section 2, Pace of Miracles in the Lessons. What is that, 50? What is it, 59?
Yeah, our book's bigger.
Yeah, you went wrong all last class.
I was on page. You could have told me. Okay. All right.
What page then? 59.
Okay, let's have a look. Let's see what it says in Vayikra. Let's look at the Torah. V'chamisha yom l'chodesh hazeh chag hamatzot. It is the holiday of matzot. Hashem refers to it as the holiday of matzot. We refer to it as the holiday of Pesach. What's the difference, by the way? Why do we call it Pesach and the Torah calls it Chag HaMatzot? Because Hashem Pasach over the Batei Yisrael. He jumped over the house of the 10th plague. We're going to see the 10 plagues, we're going to learn them. Jumped over the houses of the Jewish people and saved us. And the Mitzrayim firstborn were taken. So we are grateful for that. Actually, I think Uncle has translated the words Pesach as Chamal. Right? He had Chamla, he had mercy upon us. Right? It was merciful. We refer, Hashem refers to it as Chag HaMatzot. It's an understanding, it's an interpretation. Actually, it's a translation, but a translation is an interpretation. We refer to it as Pesach because we're grateful for that. Hashem refers to Chag HaMatzot because we left Mitzrayim and had great faith and relied upon Hashem. So that's us having gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So each one of us refer Hashem, the Jewish people refer to it differently. But both titles work. That makes sense? Okay. Shivas Yamim Matzo Tochelu. You should eat matzah. Bayom Rishon, the first day, Nikra Kodesh. It's going to be a holy day. Yelachem. Kol Melechat Avodah Lo Tasu. You cannot do malacha. This is an official holiday of the Jewish people. V'kravtem Ishem LaHashem Shivas Yamim. You're going to bring this the sacrifice for 7 days. Bayom Hashvi Mikra Kodesh Kol Melechat Avodah Lo Tasu. And again on the 7th day, it's also a convocation. So we have the bits in between, which we refer to as Chol HaMoed, which are holiday yet weekday time. But the main part of the holiday, the beginning, first day and the last day. Okay, we're in Golus, right? We have Safek Yom, we do an extra day both ends, but actually it's 1 day, biblically 1 day on both ends. Okay? So that's the holiday itself. Okay? And that begins the 15th of Nisan until we get to the 21st of Nisan. Happens to be on the 7th day as well. There's an extra celebration. What happened on the 7th day? Very, very good. Kriyas Yamsuf. Okay, that's actually the celebration of Kriyas Yamsuf. That Hashem split the sea, the Red Sea, for the Jewish people. Okay. Okay, let's have a look at the Maharal
On the 21st day.
of Nisan. Yeah, 7 days after leaving Mitzrayim. Okay, so Pesach is yeah. So the makos, the miracles are a major part of the story. We mentioned already that up to this point in Jewish history, or even world history, there are no open miracles mentioned in the Torah. There are private miracles, right? We know Midrashim of Avram Avinu being thrown into Kivshan Aish. We know Sarah Meinu gave birth at an extremely old age. There were personal, private miracles that occurred to people. But open miracles did not begin until Mitzrayim. So the open miracles of the Pesach story are a crucial element to the entire discussion of what happens and its relevance to us today as well. Because remember, everything comes back to this idea we mentioned at the beginning of class, right? By Members Mana said, this is a miracle time of the calendar of the year. Okay? Says the Maharal, Tamid Amaka Shil Mala Yotekasha. Each plague that the Jewish people went through, we know there were 10 makot, would increase in severity. Okay, they got worse and worse and worse. Okay, right? We follow by light on, it's always stronger and stronger. The plagues went up and up and up. So how did it work? So we have 10 individual plagues that the Jewish people witnessed at that time. We were not affected by the plagues themselves, by the makos. Okay? Let's have a look. We're going to group up the plagues in different ways. Okay? You know, just over the page, if you don't mind, just 1 second, page 61, just so we get a general picture, then we'll go into the sources that discuss. We'll go back in a second. So here we have the 10 plagues. Right? Dam, Tzefadeya, Kinim, blood, frogs and lice. Those are the first 3. That's one grouping. The second grouping is Oirev, wild animals. Right? Dever, some kind of epidemic that came upon them. Shchin and boils, that's the second grouping. The third grouping is hail, locusts, right? Barad, Arbe, and Choshech. That's the third grouping, which is the worst grouping of all 3. And Choshech was the worst of the last 3. And then finally, the worst of all of them is the Makas Bechoros, is the killing of the firstborn. Okay, so let's just chart this out, because we see that these weren't just random plagues. Every one of these plagues came to teach them a lesson and lasted a certain amount of time, right? There was a warning for the first 2 plagues, right? And then the plague lasted about a week each, I believe. So what was the idea of it? So firstly, we see that the first grouping involved water, creatures, and the dust of the earth. He said God's power over. So the first grouping represented everything that's in the earth, right? The water and the creatures inside the waters and the dust on the earth itself. Okay. The second grouping involves land animals, that's the Oirev, right? The Dever, that's what affected the animals and killed them off. And Shchin, humans, whatever lives on the earth, were affected by the second grouping of 3.
What was the first one that represents?
Water, the earth, water and earth. The second grouping are that which lives upon the earth. And the final grouping, which is Barad, Arb, and Hoshek, represents the heavens, what comes down from on top. Right? Because the hail comes from above, and the locust came from flying in, and the darkness obviously came from the dark covered. So that's control. Hashem is showing his control over the universe as well. So we have earth, what's on it, and the skies. And finally, Makas Bachoros was the worst to represent all three. That's the power over life and death. Okay? So the physical location of each one of them has a very major lesson that has to be learned out. Okay? Okay, so now we have that. Let's just jump back. That's just the overview I wanted to give you. So each place as the Maharal got worse and worse and worse, and came as a training session. This was really the University of Egypt. Okay, this was the lessons they had to go through, and each one came with a moral lesson or an idea that went with the plague itself. And how we are now going back to page 59. We did the chart. Go back to 59. So it says in Shemot, Kamar Hashem, Bezos Teidaki Ani Hashem. They're going to know through this, through these plagues, that I'm Hashem. She'enei Anochi Makeh B'Mateh, right? Asher B'Yadi, Alamayim Asher B'Yor, V'Nafchol Adam. All the water is going to turn into blood. Okay, that's the first plague. Actually, there's a very interesting Rashi based on a Midrash that says even these 10 plagues follow the same order. This is a Rashi in Chumash. He brings out a little bit of it. Doesn't finish it off, but fortunately the Art Scroll brings down the rest of it. That each one of these actually is how humans go to battle. First of all, they affect the water supply, because they're out water, they can't live. Right? Then they sound the trumpets, they're going to attack. That's the Sephardeia. Then they shoot arrows. That's like the kinnim that goes into their body. Right? Then you have the wild animals, and the troops come in. Right? Then they kill off the troops. Right? Then you physically attack them. So he actually shows how this order is also how humans fight as well. I forgot to mention that a moment ago, but there it is. So says the Malbim very famously as well. V'Seder HaRishon, so we're dividing it three. By the way, also on the staff of Moses, this was etched. The title of each one of these plagues, the letter of each one of these plagues was etched out. And we actually mention it in the Haggadah. Right? What do we say in the Haggadah? We give the acronym Desach, Adash, Bach, right? That's this. That's this. Even on the Mata of Moshe Rabbeinu, by the way, the staff of Moshe Rabbeinu is a fascinating, there's a reason that was used as the catalyst. We could talk for an hour just about the staff of Moses. I'm going to write a book on the staff of Moses one day. I want to get through this one. Okay, the staff of Moses was made of sapphire. It's extremely hard. Where did Moshe Rabbeinu get it from? His father-in-law's house. Yisro had it implanted in the ground, and it was a known thing. Whoever took it out, right, like the Excalibur sword, right? So that's where that comes from. Whoever took it out would get to be the next leader, and people would try and pull. He turned up and boop, came straight out. It's the Midrash on the staff of Moses. Okay. Extremely strong and powerful, but that's not for now. What I represented. Okay, that's fascinating. So he says, Aseder Rishon, Baal Varer, Messias Hashem. The first set of 3 plagues came to demonstrate the reality and existence of Hashem. Okay, that's because Pharaoh denied God's existence and said, "Who is this God that I should listen to him?" Right. So Pharaoh denied it. So he came along and said, "Oh, this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu." Then it says, "V'fleitiu b'emahu et Eretz Goshen." Goshen was the Jewish people living inside Mitzrayim. Asher ami omed aleya, that my people stand. Leviltiyot sham orev lamantideki ani Hashem b'kerav haaretz. So they have to know that I'm God in the midst of the land. So the second set of plagues came to represent that pasuk, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was coming in, and Hashem was showing that He supervises what happens on the land, not just the land itself and the waters. What happens on the land itself. But Hashem has control over Hashem's hashgacha over what happens in this world. Okay. So he says, "V'shes seda zeh sheni shel adash balavarer pinat hashgacha shepara lo hamin Hashem," because Paro did not believe in Hashem. Helio mashkiach. Right now, by the way, Paro had lots of gods. He had lots and lots of them. And the Midrash says that when Moshe Rabbeinu turned up and said, "Hello, I'm here to represent the name Yud Kei Vav Kei," Paro was like, never heard of him, and got his kids to bring out a big, thick book with all the names of the gods in. And he opened it up, and he went, no, he's not here. So why don't you just add him to the end of the list? Why didn't Paro just add Yud Kei Vav Kei? And fine, we got another one. There were 95,000. There's 95,001. Why couldn't he just do that? Because the concept of Yud Kei Vav Kei is a complete different concept to any god, small g, that came before. Any god that came before this point, we created, and they were afraid of. Right? They had the god of the Nile because they needed the Nile. They had the god of the sun, Ra, the sun god, because they needed the sun. They had the son of the fish because they needed the fish. They had Dagon, the fish god. Right? But when Moshe Rabbeinu turned up, he says, "No, we're talking about the god of love." It's like, what? That was a complete new concept. It can't be. Like, gods need to be appeased. We have to kill our children to appease them. We have to kill ourselves to appease the gods. He'd say, no, it's not the way it is. It's a whole new concept that there's a God that runs the entire world mercifully. That really was the big difference. And these plays came to demonstrate that. Hashem's absolute control over the entire world. Okay. We're now on page 60. First of all, we did the first pasuk and the first three plagues, then the second pasuk, the second three plagues, and now we're going to do the third pasuk and the Malbim's understanding of those last plagues. Ki b'pam hazot, it says, "Ani sholech et kol megavotai." I'm going to send all of my geifers, all of my plagues. El libcha uvavdefcha memecha bavor teda ki ein kemoni b'chol haaretz. You should know there's no one else like me. So the Malbim says Moshe was being instructed to tell Paro that the purpose of the third set of plagues, the hail, the locusts, the darkness, was to demonstrate that God has absolute unparalleled power and ability. Even though Hashem's existence and providence were already demonstrated, Paro still thought there were other gods that were also in control. So no, he's also in control of everything. So it's everything on the earth, everything that lives, the earth itself and the waters, everything on the earth, and everything in the universe, in creation. Okay. So now the table we looked at makes more sense. Everything that came with a specific order, in a specific way, in order to make a very important point to Paro and the Jewish people. And remember, these plagues did not affect the Jewish people.
I have a question. So Paro did not believe in God at all. He just believed in his idols.
He believed in gods. They had plenty of gods.
Okay.
But there's one overarching, one being very important, unified. Right? The idea of many gods and one God is a massive difference. The idea of a unity that controls the entire world in a merciful fashion that doesn't need to be appeased, that was a chiddush. That was a new concept to him. And that's what these plays can demonstrate. Hashem's complete providence, hashgacha, over the entire world, all of creation and all of history. And that's why he himself had to come and take the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim.
Doesn't
Right.
that sound better than having to do things? Wouldn't that sound better to the king versus having millions of gods you need to pleasure all of them, as opposed to just serving one that does things for you?
You're saying, wouldn't it be better? He should have just picked up the book and thrown it away and accepted the God. You would have thought, right? You would have thought. Obviously not. Obviously not. So you have to remember as well, we see this in Greek times, when we discuss Hanukkah next semester, we'll see that it sounds weird to us, but they controlled their gods to some degree. Right? The Greeks saw us as greater than gods, on par. Gods were on par with us.
Then what makes them different than them? Why did they consider themselves gods?
That's exactly the point. And that's what Paro did. Paro saw himself as a god as well. He himself saw himself as someone in power. Remember that? That's why he went to the Nile early in the morning to the bath. That famous Moshe Rabbeinu had to go to the Nile to make a point to him, just when he was going to relieve himself in the Nile every morning and say, you're not a god. The idea of a unified existence, echad doesn't mean one, it means there is only one. There is a unification through the entire world. It's all one thing. It's one DNA that really connects everything in the world. That was the Chiddush. And from the days of Avodah Zarah, that started right after Adam Rishon, there was a plurality. They started to divide it up. Yeah.
So the first set was just to show, okay, there is a God, there's one God, and
Yeah.
then the second one was to show there's a God that's involved in everyone's life.
Right. And the third set is that Hashem controls all the universe and everything in it.
So which is the one where you said that Hashem is a God, a merciful God? That's the second?
No, that's Hashem's. It shows Hashem's hashgacha over the entire thing. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to give out to him in totality. Right? That's the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei concept. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the ultimate controller and comes with mercy. Right? He's treating his people with mercy. He sees his people who are suffering, the Jewish people, and Hashem himself took them out.
So
And he was defending us.
But he's showing that through the second set of plagues?
Through everything. Through everything. Okay? So those are your 10 plagues. That's the division they go through. 3, 3, 3, and 1.
What's the one?
That's the Makos Bachoros. That's the
No,
death of the firstborn. That's Hashem having control over all life and death. That's the greatest of all the plagues. And that was the point that broke Paro. Well, the fact he was the firstborn as well probably added to that.
And what was the one before that? I thought that one was God controls everything.
Yeah.
But then,
Okay. Let's look at the Be'er Yosef. He goes a little bit more about the plagues. Okay. We see the arov referred to as a swarm. Now the wild animals are referred to as an arov, a swarm. Okay.
where are you?
We're on the next page. Page 61, 62.
Wait, didn't we what about Makat Bechorot? Because you said that's its own thing?
That's its own one. That stands apart. Makat Bachoros was worse than all of them. That's the ultimate one. That's the 10th plague.
So we went through all three sets, but what's the fourth one?
That is its own set. The 10th one is its own set.
But I'm saying,
Hashem control over life and death. Hashem's
so
out.
that's what they were showing.
That's what. Absolutely. That's when the Pesach happened. Right. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought all different creatures from all the world, they say, in order to make his point. Look at Anne's on page 62. Look at A1. We'll do it in the English. This plague consists of different species of animals all over the world. Of course, some of these animals can only live and survive in very cold climates. However, like snakes, can live in a hot climate. Nevertheless, during this plague, all the species were able to coexist. There was a unity, even the animals. That's also a very key part of this whole thing. During the plagues, things which normally don't get on so well were unified. Unity is really the key of it. Like, for example, the barad, right? The hail. And remember what the hail actually consisted of? Fire and ice, right? Two opposites went to coexist. The Baruch Hu was able to unify in order to make this point. Things which don't normally unify. This demonstrated conclusively that it was a miracle and not just a natural phenomena. But people at that time saw this as natural phenomena. And remember, this is also very important, the plagues were set up in a way that you could have ascribed them to phenomena. This is a general concept on plagues, on miracles altogether. Every time there's a miracle in the Torah, no matter what the miracle is, there is always a natural explanation that's put into the verses itself. Always a natural explanation. For example, we know the sea split, but the night before there was an easterly wind that came through the entire night. So you could see and say, of course it's going to split. There's a wind. Moshe Rabbeinu, how did the dam come? What happened? Right. The kinim came, right? He threw the dust over the entire earth. There was always some physical action. This goes right through Tanakh. Every time there's a miracle, there's always something they have to do. Right? Some physical action, which was to bring the oil out. Right? What does he say? Right? Elijah says you have to bring lots and lots of pots, and we're going to fill up the pots, and there's a bit of oil. Take a little bit of oil, and it's going to increase. Why don't you just take it all out of nowhere? It has to be something in this world that it comes from. Every miracle always has a room for doubt. There's always room for doubt. Otherwise, the person's free will is taken away. Okay? So every one of these miracles left a little room of doubt, because they're like, yeah, it's a natural phenomenon. And there's many people who believe these plagues happen, and they be like, it just happened to be. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu knew the tides that would come to split the sea. Right? There happened to be a volcano that exploded, that brought the ash and darkness over the world. Could that have been the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it? Yeah. Could have been the methodology used. We're not. Yeah.
I thought you just said the whole point of Dever and Bara was to show that it's not a natural phenomenon.
But there's always room for doubt.
But how is there any room for doubt in any of these?
Because everything needed something to happen. There was always a physical action that happened before.
So how would you explain?
It wasn't like they just like died off, right? Wild animals came. These seemingly natural phenomena. You're right, they weren't.
But I'm saying, how would you explain fire in ice?
So it's a miracle. Exactly. We know that. They turn around and tell volcano ash. They'll find something. There's always something in their mind they can do to conjure it up. There's always a possibility that it was a natural phenomenon. You've got to work hard, but it's there. Okay? So each one miracle had a miracle within inside it.
Well, what's it saying about the animals?
It's saying that even that, it wasn't just animals turn up, they came from all over the world. There was conditions that were right for them. There were miracles inside miracles. Yeah? There's always a miracle inside the miracle itself. Nissim within the Nissim.
And what was the example they gave of the animals?
How the animals turned up, you can read it. The animals turned up, each one from different places. They didn't attack each other, and they had the right conditions in order to live in that particular part of the world. That itself was miraculous. Okay.
So all the animals of the world came to Israel?
Many animals, not all the world, but animals from all over the world came to Israel, not all the animals. The animals that weren't naturally their habitat. Okay? That's why it's a swarm. That's why it's an orev. Just one example of it. When I went to Israel about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I mean, I go a few times a year in leading trips. They always question you in the airport, right? And they always question you, make sure you're not a terrorist. You don't get that? Very, very tough. But it's good, it's good, it's good. When they see me and they see my last name, they bring out the heavy artillery. That's when the rubber gloves are snapped on. You know. Anyway, they always ask you questions, right? So I would take groups of like Jews who were completely secular. Like, okay, fine. What's your B'mitzvah Parsha? What's this? What's that? So I turned up and they went, okay, what is Shabbat HaGadol? Obviously. I said, when is Shabbat HaGadol? I apologize. When is Shabbat HaGadol?
What happens if you can't answer that?
What?
What happens if you can't answer that?
They don't let you on the plane. You know, they're not. It's not a test. They want to see how you react to certain things.
Yeah, but that's only if we take L off.
Yes, because that's the one they want to blow up. That's exactly it. It's specifically El Al. Funnily enough, they want to kill the Jews, right? So it's a good question though. So when is Shabbat HaGadol and what's it got to do with it? And actually most people are not aware, Shabbat HaGadol is actually a miracle. We can look at it right now. Shabbat HaGadol, we're on the next page. Shabbat HaGadol is celebrated the Shabbat before Passover. God bless you. Interesting, we do it then. But that's not when the miracle happened. What miracle are we talking about? So the Bnei Yisrael were told to bring, on the 10th of Nisan, a sheep, right, into their homes and tie it to their beds.
Oh, it was a miracle that they weren't killed.
So there was a nace. What was this sheep used for? The Korban Pesach. Why was this such a dangerous thing to do? Because the Egyptians worship sheep as well, because they needed a sheep. So it was one of their gods. Not the only god, there's a whole plethora of other ones, but it was one of their gods. They worshipped the sheep. So we took one of their gods, brought it into our homes, kept it there for a few days to make sure there wasn't any mum in it, there wasn't any blemish in it, and then we sacrificed it, and then we cooked it overnight, right? And then we ate it. We ate their God. We had God burger. We had God kebab. Is what happened. Let's have a look inside. This is the Torah Chaim. Hatam lefi shenasa nes bon nes gadol shepesach Mitzrayim. V'kacho ba'asor kirtiv ba'asor lachodesh, on the 10th day of the month. That's not when we celebrate it. Okay, we celebrate the Shabbat for Pesach, which could or could not be 10th of Nisan. Why we do it then is just, well, we'll see another reason, but it's done then. Yichol lechem seh, take for yourself this sheep. L'bayis avos, sell a bayis. Each house has to have its own one. For Pesach shiatzu Mitzrayim. Hayom yom chamisha asar. They left on the 15th. Kedida b'seder olam, as we know from the dating books. They left on the 15th. The nim sesh asar b'chodesh sheyah Shabbat. So that actual year, the 10th of Nisan, fell out on Shabbat. They took a sheep for the Pesach offerings. They tied it to the beds. Basically, I always thought, why would they go to the bedroom and tie it to the bedroom? Because back then, you literally had a room with a bed in it. That was basically it. That was the only furniture, sitting still. So it was basically the way of containing the animal. Vashalom Mitzrim, and the Mitzrim said, "What are you doing? Lamazeh lachem." Shivum, we got it. L'shachto, because we're going to kill it. We're going to kill it. L'shem Pesach. Mitzvah Hashem. This is the mitzvah of Hashem. Hashem wants us to kill this animal. Aleinu vayu sheneim kaos. They got, literally means their teeth were on edge, but they got really, really angry. Ashach tenes Elokeim, Eloheihem. Actually, they were going to kill their God. What? Chutzpah, you slave people, are going to kill our God? However, Hashem did a miracle. They weren't able to do anything to them at all. The Hashem osonates for this actual miracle, we call it the Great Shabbat. So we don't celebrate 10th of Nisan, we celebrate the Shabbat before Pesach. And the Shabbat, it's called the Great Shabbat, because the great miracle that happened allowed us to make the Korban Pesach and do the mitzvah of eating the Korban Pesach, like the Paschal lamb. And that miracle itself represents the final nation of the Jewish people before they left Mitzrayim. Okay? Because they ate the Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim before they left. Now they were free at that point. Because Paro, the Matos Bachoros, the night before, remember you as children, right? Paro in pajamas in the middle of the night. Right? Paro in pajamas in the middle of the night. Why? Because in the middle of the night, he got out of bed and had to go and kick the Jews out. This happened afterwards. So they didn't run out as soon as we were left free. We waited, ate Korban Pesach, we put the bread in our bag, and then we left. We left, actually, the next day, in the middle of the day, during broad daylight. A number of things happened in broad daylight. We didn't sneak out. We left open, with everyone can see us, broad daylight. Okay? So that's the miracle of Shabbat Gadol. Now, nowadays, we don't really do anything in Shabbat Gadol, but it's a famous idea that you give a drasha. Right? The rabbi gives a long class in the shul, because there's so many halachot to Pesach, as we're going to see, God willing, this semester. We'll be learning together, all of them, that they use as a way to summarize all the halachot of Pesach. Okay? Okay, so we did the 10 plagues. It was one set, if you will, divided into 4 sections. We did this set as well. 7 days later, we're going through all the miracles. Then we get to, 7 days later, we get to the Yam Suf. The Yam Suf. You know what? Let's stop with that. I want to review for the midterm. Please remind me. We're going to pick up on page 64 next class. And we're going to talk about Kriyat Yam Suf and its connection to the rest of the miracles. Because that was the pinnacle of all the miracles that started with the Makos right through to there. Okay. Let's talk midterm. Yay.